let this be the catalyst you need. If you were looking at your life pre-COVID-19 and maybe you weren't really living the life you wanted to live anyways, right? Well, then use this as the opportunity to start going in that better direction, right? So whether that means there is some secret group out there for the benefit of mankind trying to motivate us and push us this direction, or it's something, in the spiritual plane that we might not be aware of, or it is what it appears to be, that there are people who are humans who are out for, different purposes than most of us, and we just have to overcome that. Either way, use this as a catalyst to move in the direction that you want to be that person you've been striving to be. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we have a special guest, Derrick Broze, and he's here to talk about a movement that's been taking place. It's called Expose Bill Gates, where basically what he's trying to do, I'm going to let him explain it better, but we're just trying to expose Bill Gates and all the crazy things that he's been up to. And if you're following me in the show, then it's no surprise to you. But if you are new to all this, then I'm going to bring in Derrick to explain it. So what's up, Derrick? How's it going?
Hey, it's going reasonably well, considering everything going on, right? But I'm doing well, and things are going good in my world. And as you said, we're here to talk about Expose Bill Gates and see if we can get more people thinking about these things and asking questions about it.
Awesome. So for those who aren't familiar with this movement at all, how did this start? What was the idea? I mean, I love it. To me, I like it because Bill Gates, it's such a public figure. Everybody basically knows who he is. And it really is easy to expose. If somebody wants to pay attention and they're honest about it, it's easy to expose him to people. I mean, there's people that are never going to listen no matter what. Those are people you just can't reach. But the people that are on the fence, and I know a lot of these people, I feel that there is the evidence that's out there. So to me, when I heard this, I was in love with it. But how did you come up with it, and give some background maybe?
Yeah, so as you've noticed, surely, and I'm sure your audience has as well, that in the last, we're in August now, so the last 6 to 7 months, as the coronavirus started to sweep the world and all this just became the new normal, Bill Gates has been paraded around as a hero to a lot of people because, he predicted this in 2015 and we just didn't listen to him. And if only we would have listened to Bill Gates, we would have had this figured out. And being put in front of us, in front of BBC and all the different news stations, and not just in the US, but internationally, really. And so I started to think about who really is Bill Gates. And of course, if you've been involved in these circles for a number of years, you hear things about Bill Gates, or he's obviously a billionaire and he's profit driven and these sorts of things. But I felt like there was definitely more to it, but I hadn't taken the time to really do the deep dive myself. So back in I think May, April, I started on a 3-part investigation called it was just called the philanthropic narrative shaping, about Bill Gates' money, how he uses money to guide and influence global health policy, talking about how he's connected to everything involving COVID-19. And then the 3rd part of the investigation looked at his connection to the Rockefellers, to eugenics, and to a lot of crazy other types of issues that some people haven't really delved into or maybe aren't ready to go to yet. And as I was doing that, fellow researcher James Corbett released his amazing 4-part documentary series on Bill Gates. And so they both kind of came out around the same time, and it just seemed like, that's at the end of James's documentary, he sort of said, like, hey, if you've made it through all this information, you're now more informed than the average person about Bill Gates and about his agenda. It's up to you to spread this. And I ended my article series on a similar note, basically saying, like, hey, if you've made it this far and you've got this information, it's important for us to go out there and to spread it. I've started as an activist 10 years ago, and I'm still very much have my roots in the streets, and think that sometimes the most valuable thing we can do is just have a face-to-face conversation with somebody, hand them a flyer, talk to them as a person. Social media is great, but sometimes it just sort of gets lost in the matrix of Facebook and all that sort of thing, where you can talk to somebody face-to-face and can have a lot more weight. So I decided just to kind of put it out there, this idea of, hey, what if we did an Expose Bill Gates Day to encourage people to go to the streets, to use social media, use these hashtags, to share my articles, to share James's documentary, to share other relevant and credible information about who Bill Gates really is, and just have a focus on that for at least one day. And we did that the first time on June 13th, just a couple months back, and it was a great success. It went viral, across Twitter and some other platforms. We had people translating the information to Farsi, to German, to Spanish. I believe we had a few other languages in there. And so, yeah, we saw some good results, and it was really awesome see. And so that's kind of where everything started.
Yeah, I think that I was remember when that happened, and I took part in that and did what I could on social media with the people that follow me. And what I noticed is I think it was a giant success because the media responded afterwards, and there was just this hail of praise toward Bill Gates, and all these conspiracy theorists are going after Bill Gates. So I think if the media, the giant, wakes up and acknowledges and has to run cover for what you did, I think that it kind of proves that you that you were successful, even a little bit. Now,
No, I
go
agree
ahead,
with
go ahead.
that.
Yeah,
I was going to say I agree because since that day, obviously, again, Bill Gates has been on the media since this whole thing began, but it seems coincidental that we did get some media coverage, but it just called us conspiracy theorists or whatever. But since that time, it seems like the media and Bill Gates have been going to extra lengths to address these conspiracy theorists that just won't go away. And I think it's because they do recognize that people are questioning the narrative more than ever.
yeah, that's great. And obviously, well, if you look into Event 201, which I'm sure you have, they were ready for conspiracy theorists. They planned for this. They knew that there were people that were out there that were going to realize that this was not what they were telling us. And, so, but my question is, do you think that, because it seems to me that they had to go a little overboard. So do you think that, because a lot of people will think that there's this they, and they have control of absolutely everything, and there's really nothing you can do. I don't think that's the case myself, though. I think that that's what they want you to believe, because a belief like that will keep you, in non-action, really. So the question is, do you think that events like this, how do you think they have to adapt? And do you think that it actually will, do you think it, I mean, obviously you think it makes a difference, but that's that's not what I meant with the question. But what do you how do you think they have to shift their tactics and stuff? Because like I said, so many people, they just think it's set in stone no matter what I do, and they like to complain about it on Facebook, but they don't really. They think it's all hopeless, And like I said, this media, especially this overreaction, it just shows me that you guys are getting stuff done.
Yeah, I agree with you there, man. I think it's important for us. Well, I'll say two things. I think it's important for us to not underestimate and not overestimate the power that they have. Because on one hand, as you mentioned, Event 201, we know that powerful people in these global institutions for decades and probably for going on centuries now have sort of put out their thought experiments of, hey, what if this happened? How would we respond to it, right? And just like with 9/11, a lot of these events that we see happen, they're preceded by exercises like the Event 201 simulating a global coronavirus pandemic. So clearly there's planning going on. There's thought. There's pre-thought ahead, and they're forward thinking. So we shouldn't ignore that and recognize that these people do think ahead. They seem to think generationally, whereas most of us are thinking what's right in front of us and what are we doing tomorrow, where these people are thinking, how's my family line going to affect the future? So we shouldn't underestimate that. And yet at the same time, you're 100% right that we shouldn't overestimate it either, because I've come across these folks as well who just seem to be totally, as you said, hopeless, just giving up. Like, well, it's, everything's screwed, so there's nothing we can do. We might as well just sit at home or just complain on Facebook or whatever, or just kind of wait for it to happen. There's no reason to go out there. Everything's useless. And I clearly do not agree with that, because if I did, I wouldn't be out here on the streets trying to do something like this. And even if I did, I probably would still take these actions, because, we got to do something, or at least I feel called to do something. So, it can be overwhelming to see how much planning goes on in our world, and to see all the corruption and see how it's all interconnected in these different pieces. But I do believe another part of that control grid, as you mentioned, is the false belief that there is no way to organize, that there's no way to overcome, and thus we should just do nothing. We should just lie down and take it, and that's not something I'm willing to do. And as I said earlier about the getting to the streets and talking to people, I mean, when I started to wake up 10 years ago in 2009, 2010, the first thing I could think of was, for one, I was freaking out, like a lot of us, like, learning all these new things. It's just like, oh my God, it's about to happen. Like, the police state now, I mean, it kind of feels like it's about to happen even more than it did back then. But I went through that kind of panic phase. And I think many of us go through these phases. It's sort of like the grieving process. As you're grieving, realizing that a lot of things, if not everything you've been taught, is a lie. And you can go through like the panic stage, you know, you can go through the fear stage, and again, like, oh my God, it's screwed, there's nothing we can do. And then eventually you kind of come to a place of acceptance, and from there I think you can start thinking, okay, now I'm clear-headed, I see what's going on, now what can I actually do? Okay, I'm going to start a podcast, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, I'm going to go print out flyers, I'm going to talk to my family and my friends. You start trying to think of how can you be proactive. And I feel like that's where we really should be focusing our energy right now, because while there are quite a, you know, there's quite a mountain to overcome here and quite a mountain to climb that we're facing, and I think we are in for some rough times ahead. The people, I believe, who will thrive and not just survive are the people who are going to be proactive and forward thinking. And whether that means doing things like Expose Bill Gates Day, or just talking to your loved ones, or, you know, making sure you have you know, things to take care of yourself, or just, as you know, yourself, like trying to inject humor into things and keep things, you know, recognizing what we're fighting for, what we're trying to, you know, why are we even in this? Like, if we don't realize what beauty is out there in the world, like last week I had this awesome escape for a couple of days with my partner and got to go out and be in the hill country and watch deer eating and just chill with the wind and just put away my work for a few days. And it was just this clear feeling, this clarity of, oh yeah, this is why I've been doing everything I've been doing. This is why I've been stressing myself out. This is why I've been pushing so hard, is because of all this beauty in the world. So sorry to go off on that tangent, but I do think that, you know, we shouldn't be overwhelmed and thinking that everything's hopeless, but we should also make sure that we take time, because the mental clarity, the spiritual clarity is just as important, if not more important, than educating yourself about what's going on in the world. And it's something I struggle with, and I have to, you know, strive for that balance, and okay, I need to pull back a little bit, you know, and go get some time for myself so that I can come back recharged and remembering why I put these efforts in.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because you mentioned when you woke up, you were just, it was like hopeless, or you were just in a daze, and you're like, oh my God, because I think that's really what happens. Once people realize, they start to pull on this thread, and you realize that this really is upside down world, and that you can lose your bearing really easily. So I feel the key for me anyway was to get to know myself, and to do the spiritual work, to do the shadow work, to heal aspects of myself that were actually blinding me to more of what was going on. Because I mean, a little bit about myself, I kind of woke up to a lot of this in like 2004, 2005-ish. I watched, I think it was the Zeitgeist movies and all that stuff. But I realized there was really nothing I can do. So for me, it was like a good bit of knowledge to tell people, but I still went on living my life. And it wasn't until I was able to heal addictions that I had, and just things that were keeping me busy, that were keeping me distracted. And what I've realized is that most of this society is just engaged in one form of escapism or another. And when something like this happens, you get a few different reactions. You know, a lot of people will wake up, and some of those people that wake up, they freak out and lose their minds. I feel like that's kind of happened to my mom a little bit. I mean, she's doing all right, but you know, she's been watching Vinny Eastwood and stuff, which is good. And she's been seeing a lot of this stuff, but I keep trying to tell her, like, it's always been this way. You know, she'll always come up to me, did you know this? Did you know this? I'm like, yeah, no, I know, but it's always been this way. And, you know, that's why I try to, and I use her as other people I know that are waking up, is kind of like I'm speaking to them when I talk about stuff like this. So it's always it's good to get to know yourself and get over all that stuff. And it's just like Sun Tzu said, you know, if you know your enemy, you can win half the battles. If you know yourself, you can win half the battles. If you know both, you can win both sets of the battles. And I feel that they are really underestimating us. But, you know, like a lot of people say the internet's just like a psyop or a limited hangout. But I feel that it really let people get together and connect in this way. And some of us, I feel some of it was maybe part of the distraction, part of the control, just more noise, people yelling back and forth. But there's a lot of people out there that are making a real connection, and they're talking about real solutions. And things like Expose Bill Gates are perfect, because it's something that everybody can relate to.
Absolutely.
So I like to commend you on that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to comment on a couple of things you said there, man, because they're so important. For one, like, you know, I think you can see my shirt, The Conscious Resistance, and so that's the name of my website and book series, and it's 100% in line with what you were saying there. That to me, the conscious resistance is the recognition, the realization, the understanding that the struggle for a more free, ethical, just world, it's not just going to come from, oh, look, it's the Bill Gates, it's the Monsantos, we have to do the inner work. We have to heal our own trauma. We have to that's such a huge component. And as I'm sure you see, a lot of activism tends to be missing that component. And so I've tried to bring those things together over the last 10 years or so, and myself as well, man. I mean, my journey, even before activism, before I was kind of like you, I watched Zeitgeist, I watched a few other things, but I don't think I was ready to fully incorporate them into my life yet. And it was because for me, I was addicted to drugs. When I was 20 years old, I got addicted to crystal meth. I went to prison, and that was really what started my like waking up process, because I ended up doing 18 months behind bars over a couple of year period, in and out, and just on parole, on probation, then eventually getting a felony, on parole, just doing that whole thing in and out of the system for about 2 or 3 years. And it was that initial experience of getting locked up and then discovering meditation while I was in prison that got me to first start looking at my life and thinking like, well, how the heck did I get here? I started uncovering the various layers of depression that I'd been dealing with since I was a kid. And, I tried to kill myself several times as a teenager. And then I started using drugs to escape it and to mask it. And it was like, oh, this is the joy I've been looking for. And clearly that wasn't the answer. And, eventually getting locked up and having to kind of battle with those things, and to look at my family and say, like, where did this come from? Why do I feel this way? And it was through that process that I was able to slow down and recognize, well, I don't want to be locked up, but I'm stuck here. Nobody can get me out of here. So I'm going to use this time every day to journal. I started journaling every day, started meditating, and really trying to work on that trauma and unravel it. And when I got out, was able to try to reconcile some things with my birth father, who also has been addicted to drugs his entire life. And, a lot of that trauma came from that. And so even before I started to dive into 9/11 and the Bill Gates and what they're doing to our food supply and all these kinds of things, I was already sort of on this, like, waking up to my own personal trauma and my own personal healing. And then it was in 2009 when I started to read certain books and got out as a felon. I got to experience what it's like being a felon in the United States and being judged in certain ways. And so it was all this new awareness, and at the same time the sobriety of getting out of this haze of drugs that I'd been on, and rediscovering that, hey, I like to learn. I'm an intelligent person. I like to read. I want to understand the world. And I had sort of lost a lot of that under this cloud of depression and drugs and everything else. So I had to go through that side first to get myself, I think, mentally and spiritually prepared for learning about what was going on in the physical world. And so I 100% agree with you that, like, these are both important components. And I think even when it comes to a day like Expose Bill Gates, that there's a way to bring in that spirituality and that self-awareness into the actions. I mean, it doesn't have to be a sort of aggressive yelling at people, you're a bunch of sheeple, why are you wearing masks, and why can't you just see this picture? Like, I tend to think that's not very effective at all. If your goal is indeed to educate people and to reach more people, most people don't respond very well to that. There's a way to go about this in a compassionate, open-hearted way to people, like, hey, I just want to share some information to you that I think is important. You live in the same city, the same town, the same neighborhood I'm in, and I want to make sure that you get this. And of course, they can call you crazy, they can flip you off, they can do whatever, and you can say thank you, have a nice day, and if there's a chance to talk, do that. But I absolutely think that we need to make sure people, and it's clear you're doing that work there, that people understand the spiritual kind of personal development component to our activism, that it should not be overlooked. And I think, again, if we're not balancing these two things, the physical and the internal, we are really selling ourselves short.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Derrick. And I feel really that's what the problem with the entire world is. And I hate to sound like I'm judging it, but when I see people, wow, the wind is like kicking right now really hard. I'm going to shut this window. I know this is crazy. But when I see people running around the world, it's kind of like they're full-grown children. And again, it's not a judgment, because I feel like I was there also. My addiction was sex. And, when I first heard people talking about sex addiction, I was like, oh, clearly that's just something that people say so they could get away with cheating, And I was mostly single my whole life anyway, so I never had an issue with that. I was always honest, But once I saw it for what it was, I just had this moment. And then I couldn't unsee it. And then from then, my life just hasn't been the same. And that's really when I got more into this work, because I started doing stand-up comedy around 2013. And I think about a year later or so, I was podcasting and stuff. Then I tried mushrooms one time, and then I just saw something. And then from there, it was just like, boom, I started meditating. And I'm not saying that I suggest mushrooms for everybody that's listening. Everyone has their own path. But once I was able to be honest with myself, now I really can just see the BS around me everywhere. And, but I like what you said, though, about when you go up to people. I don't want to get too far off that topic. When you go up to people, you want to be nice to them, because especially now, there's so much division. When I go to the store, I'm one of the only ones without a mask, and I'm like 6'4". You can't really tell here, but so I kind of tower over most people. And a lot of people, they just either look at me or ignore me, but I try to smile at everybody because I have this, this nice, beautiful smile with these dimples. Everyone always been telling me my whole life. So I try to share that. And most times I get a pretty good reaction. I haven't had anybody really give me a hard time. Just going into places, sometimes the people there, I've had to leave, like the people in charge, because they weren't agreeing with me, even though legally I'm correct, but it's just not worth it sometimes. But I've never had somebody in the store come up to me, and I've heard a couple stories like that. But yeah, I think like you said, it's, if they do something, somebody approaches you or they call you crazy or they want to yell at you because of the mask, I think it's okay to say to them, I understand that you're upset, or I understand you're scared. Instead of elevating, you bring it down. It's kind of like jujitsu, because you're right. There's no reason to have to fight with this person. I'm not speaking to you, obviously, but you don't have to fight with this person or try to prove facts to them. Just empathize with them. Listen to what they have to say. A lot of these people think it's bullshit anyway. They'll be even saying under their breath, this is bullshit, but I'm just wearing it, So but I think that is really important. It's about empathy and connecting with people. And the other reason why I feel this is important is because I'm a poker player, and I've learned that sometimes I don't always know what my opponent is doing, but if I could sense what he wants me to do, I'll do the complete opposite. He or she, by the way, I don't discriminate. I'll take ladies' money at the poker table. But yeah, so I can tell that they want a division in society. I can tell that they want me to be in despair. So what am I doing? I'm laughing, and I'm laughing, and I'm trying to connect with people instead of doing the opposite.
I love that, man. That's beautiful. And yeah, absolutely, dude. Keep sharing your smile with the world. And I do think that that's a really just important point you laid out there. I'm not a poker player myself, but I really appreciate that, because clearly we see what the opponent in this, COVID-19 game wants us to do: be afraid, be divided, fight each other. Don't come together, don't organize, don't empathize with each other, don't have compassion. And the interesting thing, kind of on that, which is why I think this whole, whatever you want to call it, pandemic is so brilliant in the way that it's being done, this operation. A buddy really helped me see it clearly recently. He was saying, typically when it comes to these type of things, they try to play on our fear and they play on our emotion, but typically in the form of fear. And clearly there's a lot of fear porn out there. There's a lot of playing on people's fear, but there's also this other element of actually playing on people's compassion, right? Because when you talk to people about the mask or these other issues, or Bill Gates, they see it from this, well, I'm doing this because I care about other people. I'm putting the mask on because I'm compassionate. I'm staying home because I'm compassionate. I'm choosing to wash my hands every 10 seconds because I'm compassionate. And Bill Gates is choosing to do what he wants because he's compassionate, right? So they're playing on our natural human desire to be compassionate towards each other. And they've sort of twisted it to make us think some things that really are probably more submissive than compassionate are the noble, virtuous thing to do. And I just think that's a really interesting aspect of this. But like you said, we can still be compassionate towards each other. In fact, we can sort of jump around that fear and avoid that and just go straight to being compassionate with each other. And when you do find somebody who's maybe totally aggressive or just caught up in that mindset, like you said, de-escalation. I'm a big believer in nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, for anybody who's never heard of him, he's a psychologist, or was a psychologist, who did lots of dispute resolution. And his book, Nonviolent Communication, is a great skill set to incorporate into your regular practices, not even just activism, but your relationships, business, personal, etc. Because it's just about trying to understand where the other person is coming from. And that, what he says is basically that conflicts tend to arise whenever one or more parties in a conversation or in a group feel that their needs are not being met, right? And so in this case, if we're out on the street or you're going to a grocery store without a mask and somebody has a very aggressive or angry or upset response, it's because their need to feel safe, which they believe is dependent on you wearing a mask, in their mind, that need is not being met, right? So by sort of coming into things with that understanding of, okay, I hear where you're at. I understand that you want to feel safe. I understand that, you're concerned that you might get sick. Maybe even the thing is, for me, it's like masks should be voluntary. If you want to wear them, that's fine. The problem for me, as somebody who is an anarchist and just generally doesn't like government getting involved, is when the government force gets involved. Like, if you want to wear a mask, I try not to judge people just the way I don't want people to judge me for not wearing a mask, because I don't know, maybe this person has some pre-existing condition and they're extra worried, or they're going to see their grandma later and they want to, you know, there's all kinds of things. There could be justifications and reasonings for why people wear a mask, and that's fine. You do that. I have a problem with the force. So I try to explain that to people, like, look, I understand you want to wear this and that's fine. Here's the way I feel about it. Let's try to understand each other, you know. And so instead of, as you said, escalating and like, let's raise my voice, let's come back at them with equal force and equal aggression. Let's try to de-escalate things and be the, you know, be the bigger person, be the more compassionate person. And when we did this Expose Bill Gates Day back in June, we had, I think, one, maybe two people who acted a little, you know, aggressive or whatever. Most people were very open, honestly. I think that, as you kind of pointed to earlier, I think more people are questioning this than we might realize, because if you pay attention to just the mainstream media or even just some of your internet circles, you feel like everybody's divided. We're at each other's throats. We're just ready to kill each other, you know. And then you go outside, and it doesn't always seem to be reflective of the real reality, at least in my experience. So, you know, talking to people can go a great length. And we only had one guy who was like looking at the flyer and like, so what are you trying to expose? You know, just right away it kind of had that attitude. It's like, oh, this will be interesting. But we had a conversation with him like, well, do you know anything about Bill Gates? And just trying to see where he's at. He's like, yeah, he's a philanthropist. He's given lots of millions of dollars. Like, are you trying to expose that he's saved lives with vaccines? You know, and you know, there was a certain level we could go to with this guy, but he clearly had his mind made up already of what he thought about us. There was no need for us to respond in kind and call him, you know, sheep or slave or whatever sort of things people like, and just, yeah, man, here's a flyer. It's got lots of information. I wrote an article. If you want to read that when you get time, there's some documentaries on there. Feel free to take it. You know, even if you don't want to read it right now, maybe you'll read it later. And that was it. You know, we wished him well. And that's how it can be sometimes. We can still be proactive. We can still be effective, and probably more effective than we are when we're just screaming and yelling at people.
Yeah, but it's so easy to scream and yell at people sometimes. I get it. I relate, you know, for people who are listening to this that are like, but I'm right and I want to tell people. I understand that. But the way I've been trying to do it is to view them as, like I said, like just children, because psychologically that's kind of what's going on. And I've even heard somebody talk about this recently, where it's like, when I'm speaking to somebody, I could kind of, when they start to act like that, you could tell in their face and their mannerisms, they look like they're a 7-year-old or a 13-year-old, you know. It's kind of like they may be reenacting some trauma that happened to them, or they're speaking to somebody else and not to you. So I believe that de-escalation is great, because I'm actually familiar with the nonviolent communication. I'm a big fan of that as well. I think some of that, I was reading or listening somewhere, some of that, there's like a little new agey stuff in there, but hey, it's like anything else. It's a tool. You got to know what's up, and you got to know yourself before you can incorporate these tools. But it's great, because if you're the one in the store or wherever it is in this public setting, and there's this dispute going on, there's other people that are watching. You have to be conscious. So just like you said, with this one guy, he might not have changed his mind. Same thing, if someone's yelling at me about a mask, I might not be able to change their mind, but my demeanor is going to speak more. You know, my body language, especially if I'm larger than this person, you know, if I use that to intimidate, but if I just stand back and I'm like nice and I'm just taking whatever they say, you know, and again, I'm not saying that you should be like a human punching bag, but it's kind of like the turn the other cheek thing in the Bible, where, you know, just, it's fine. As long as you can take it, it's just verbal abuse. Just let it roll off your back and just keep coming back with that compassion, because it's either going to drive that person crazy, but, you know, or maybe change your mind. But the people, like I said, the people around you are the ones that are going to notice, and hopefully it's going to affect them. And I also want to talk
Absolutely.
about what you said about the compassion that's gone crazy in the, you know, with this whole COVID-19 thing. It seems that what happened is, it's kind of, so like, if you think about it this way, 9/11 to me, I'm actually writing a short book about this, but then I started moving last week, so I had to put it down, but I got to get back to it. But 9/11 kind of reminds me of, it was like the sacred masculine. There was an abuse there. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I was just making sure, because it's really loud outside, so I didn't know if it was, I lost my internet or what. Yeah, so I think that 9/11 was kind of like an abuse of the sacred masculine, because I remember I was in the Marine Corps from 1994 to 98. I got out and I still wasn't really awake, and I worked on airplanes and stuff. And I just was like, I realized it was a lot of bullshit, but I was still like, it's whatever. So after 9/11 happened, I kind of had a feeling to re-enlist for like a couple days. And then I was like, wait a minute, what am I thinking? I came back to my senses. But So if I got that feeling, I could just imagine what the other males and I guess even females in society, people that just have that protective instinct. So it was like that sacred masculine was abused. And now when I'm watching this happen, they declare a pandemic on 3/11/2020, which is 222 months after 9/11. Everybody, I'm just saying, what a coincidence, huh? It seems to me like it's more of an abuse on the sacred feminine. So now it's that care. So now everybody forcibly cares about you and they forcibly want to do what's right. And I think you're right. What you can do is just turn that around. Just like the people who want to invert society, just turn it around and use people's compassion toward them and ask them about that, because then they'll say, well, I have a grandmother who's sick. And then you could just ask them about their grandmother and all this stuff. And then before you know it, you forget about it. You could talk about your grandmother. And then maybe throw in there the fact that they've never even proved that a virus existed. And Carrie Mullins, the person who invented the PCR, and said that. We all know these things. But yeah, I like to try to throw in these. Go ahead.
I really like that, though, what you were just saying. Sorry to cut you off, as far as like comparing the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And I think you're 100% right. I mean, even I'd never enlisted, but for a short period, because I was a junior in high school when the towers were collapsing. I remember watching them. And then I remember graduating high school the following year and watching the bombs dropping on Iraq and the feeling of like, we're getting the bad guys, like just all that stuff they sold to us. And for a period of time, me and a buddy were visiting a recruiter, and I had just had knee surgery from an unrelated accident, but they're like, don't worry, we can get you in. Yeah. If because after 9/11, they were taking everybody that they wanted. And like you said, even if you weren't like a gung-ho American, you kind of had this vague sense of like, wow, like there's some crazy shit going on and maybe I should go help, maybe I should be a part of this. And that is true. It's like, that tends to be what we would associate with kind of like a masculine protective mindset. And then we would associate this compassionate care and concern with the feminine energy. So, I mean, I do think you're right about that this is, again, there's so many layers to what we're witnessing, and there's so many similarities to the 9/11 operation and to what we're seeing right now as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the way I believe, I kind of believe in the synchronicity, whereas, I mean, maybe it's somebody doing it all. It could be a dark demonic force. It could just be the way this universe works, is the way it lines up, that people who align their thoughts and emotions to create action for good or evil, it's going to get manifested in this world. So I feel that that's what's going on. I feel that right now, evil, but I have this other thing. I actually kind of should run it by you since you're interested in this stuff. I feel that, how like in all the movies and stuff, it's always darkest right before the dawn. And if you think of the analogy, think of Sun Tzu and all these different analogies about war and know your enemy and kind of faking weakness, I really have this feeling that there is a force of good out there. I don't know if it's people, I'm not trying to say like QAnon or anything like that, but I just feel that there is this force of good. And if we align with it, if we get ourselves in alignment, that it's going to reach out and help us. And that's kind of what's going on right now. And the synchronicities that have happened in people's life that start to do this work and start to expose it, it really is real to me. And I feel like
I agree.
One more thing I just want to say is I feel like they have to work so hard. That's the evidence to me. The fact that they have to work so hard. They have to have the media. They have to have the compulsory schooling. They have to chop your dick off. They have to stick you in school with a bunch of people. They have to feed you all this crap. They have to put TV, all this stuff. I said school, I'll say it again, whatever. Jobs, all this stuff. So they do this to keep people just like in the Matrix, like batteries, Neo. And I feel like there must be a reason they have to do it and work so hard at it, because
I think that's a testament to the overwhelming strength and the power of the human being, right? And to the energy that we represent. And I also agree with you. I mean, I do believe in a creator. I'm not a Christian, but I do believe in a creator. And as I've gone through the journey I was sharing with you earlier, I've reconnected to my own indigenous roots and to my family's native roots, and got to start participating and learning from native ceremonies and Sundance and rituals that have been very instrumental in my own growth and my personal connection with the creator and understanding my personal path. And I would guess your own personal path as well. And I do believe that, I also am a believer in synchronicity, and I'm not so sure if I would say, things happen for a reason per se, but I do think that there's a way for us to tap into that I don't know, lack of a better term, that energy, that yin to the yang, right? If these folks represent something darker, then there has to be the counterbalance to that, right? And I always have reminded myself that if they weren't doing what they do, then we wouldn't be doing what we're doing, right? If we hadn't woke up to what they were doing, then we wouldn't be on this path to try to make things better necessarily, right? Maybe eventually it would happen somehow or another, but it seems like by them pushing in this, they've come here to do what they're meant to do. It is in their Buddha nature, if you will, to be this darkness, right? That is, they're fulfilling their purpose, whether we can understand it or not. And with that purpose being fulfilled, it's waking up many of us to our own power and helping us encourage other people to find their own power. And and it just spirals on and on and on. And I agree with what you said. Like, they have to go to such extreme lengths to try to trap the human potential into a little matrix, because there's so much of us that wants to spring forth, that wants to come out, that wants to help each other, to grow, to be healthy, and to work through these various kinds of trauma. And I know that whether it's sex addiction, drug addiction, I've met so many good people in the truther research, conspiracy community over the last decade who've also had these struggles. People that will hear me talk about my story and say, I've never touched a drug a single day in my life, but this is the way that I've struggled. This is the thing I'm dealing with, right? And I think these are the kind of traps that the Matrix has set up for us. You can get lost in sex, you can get lost in drugs, you can get lost in depression, you can get lost in gambling, anything else you want to distract you. Now with the internet, it's even easier than ever. Just scroll all day. And you have these traps, and they're kind of like landmines that some of us, we get stuck in them, and then we realize, oh, wait, that's not really the healthy thing I was looking for. There's something better. And once we're able to get to a certain point, we can kind of see there's something over here. I think there's something better over here if we can just get through all this crap. And then we tell each other, hey guys, there's something better over there. There's something better on the other side. We need to avoid these various traps that they've put out for us. So I really feel like we're at a historical point. I mean, I feel for all the crazy things happening, I was talking to my partner earlier today here in Texas where I'm at. They've just now initiated $250 fines if you're not wearing a mask in public, not just at the store, but in public. I called the city today to confirm for myself, and they literally told me if you're out walking around and you're not by yourself, you can now be detained and issued a $250 citation for not wearing a mask. And this is just insane to me. And so I try to that's going on. This is a reality that I need to contend with, and I do not plan to be one of the people who acquiesce and submit. So how am I going to go about this? How am I going to make sure that me, my loved ones, can still get the food we need, can still have the freedoms, thinking proactively about this, being aware of what's going on, but not allowing it to, like you said at the beginning, to feel like there's no hope, there's nothing we can do, and instead trying to be proactive, to be forward thinking, and hopefully planting some seeds to other people and encouraging them to take action, whether that's Expose Bill Gates Day or growing their own food or whatever it may be. I mean, there's so many things that we can do to be proactive in this historical moment, because it is a historical moment, and I'm thankful that I'm here existing and having this conversation with you, because I feel like this is our gift, is to be here, and to have a moment to influence the world around us.
I think that's great that you said plant the seeds. I mean, I agree with everything you said there, by the way. And I think it's great they said plant the seeds and then also plant food, because I feel that that's really the one of the solutions. I guess we could start talking about that too, and we could start wrapping up soon. But I wanted to talk about first, before I get into that really quick, was just that there's this a guy, I don't know if you're familiar with James True. He's a guy who does YouTube videos and stuff. And he has this theory, which is really crazy, really way out there, but I really find it interesting, because even if it's not true, it's a good exercise in empathy. And he's saying that, what if these elites, what if Tom Hanks, what if all these people, what if it was just a big show? Now, he's not trying to say there's not some murder and all this stuff going on, but what if there was a group of people behind the scenes and they were trying to wake people up by doing these things? Because the more ridiculous that it gets and the crazier it gets, like Tom Hanks in Australia, and then he's, now he's a citizen. It's kind of and like you said, these traps, it's another trap. It could be another trap for people to fall into, but also it could be a way to wake people up. And I really like that point of view. I just wanted to throw it out there. What do you think about that?
I think that is interesting. And yeah, I feel like there's, back to the sort of the spiritual component, whether it's literally physical human beings who are sitting in the back and hey, let's feed them this crazy simulation to try to wake them up to their own true power or something to that extent, or you could think about it as the creative force, the creative energy, the great mystery, giving us all the circumstances that we need to rise to the occasion. Both the struggles that we've had as individuals, the struggles that we face as the world, but it's the catalyst. Because I've had this conversation a lot recently with friends, that since this whole thing began, I've seen more people focusing on solutions, talking about growing their own food, talking about connecting with their neighbors. I have a website called freedomcells.org, which is where we create small decentralized groups, and we have a map where people can find each other. And since this whole thing has started, it's just exploded. We have like 3,500 members now from all around the world who are finding each other and connecting. And the goal is to meet in the real world and to share skills and share ideas. And I've had emails from people reaching out who are very concerned. I mean, what I've seen is this incident has been a catalyst. It's very traumatizing. It's very overwhelming, and the people need to take time to unplug from it, of course. And at the same time, it is a motivating thing. It is a motivating factor, and that's what I've been trying to emphasize to people: is let this be the catalyst you need. If you were looking at your life pre-COVID-19 and maybe you weren't really living the life you wanted to live anyways, right? Well, then use this as the opportunity to start going in that better direction, right? So whether that means there is some secret group out there for the benefit of mankind trying to motivate us and push us this direction, or it's something, in the spiritual plane that we might not be aware of, or it is what it appears to be, that there are people who are humans who are out for, different purposes than most of us, and we just have to overcome that. Either way, use this as a catalyst to move in the direction that you want to be that person you've been striving to be. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people who are now faced with the idea of death. People are afraid of dying. People are afraid of being locked down. People are afraid of not going back to normal, whatever that may have been, and this talk of a new normal. And so I think that's a motivating factor for a lot of us. And I hope that we can use that in this way, is try to take these circumstances, which are not probably what any of us would have chose, but maybe exactly what we need.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's one of these catalyzing events that's just going to separate the wheat from the chaff, is really what it is. And a lot of these people who talk about FEMA camps and forced vaccinations and all this stuff, I feel that, yeah, that might happen, but it's going to be a choice. I really think that's what's going on. I mean, I've been following Owen Benjamin a lot recently. I'm not sure if you've been following him, but he's about to take down Patreon, which is just crazy. But it's crazy because he talks about this too. And it's really just about, if you can be dependent on yourself and not the system, or just dependent on yourself as much as you can and the system less, that's really where it's going to be. It's going to be all these people who are super dependent on the system, and they're going to say, hey, we got these places. If you need food, come on down, come in. What's your name? And then it's going to, who knows what it's going to turn into. It could turn very ugly, obviously, if you look through history. But maybe there'll be a mass kill-off. Maybe a bunch of people will die. But I really think it is going to separate the weak from the strong, and that's what's going to happen. And if you could decentralize, just like you were saying, that's great. I got to check out that network. Hopefully there's people in my area that I can connect with. That'd be awesome, and that's what I'm going to move into next as we start to wrap this up, which is solutions in like homesteading or gardening or chickens and stuff like that. Now, what I'm doing is right now I'm moving out of a place I've lived for a while, and I'm moving back with my parents because of this whole terrible situation. I'm going to live in their basement for a while. But what I'm going to do is, I have a feeling I'm going to turn their backyard into a little bit of a homestead. I'm not sure if they're aware of this or not yet, but I did get the okay to get chickens and grow some stuff. So they live in just a suburban area too in Connecticut. But what my idea is, I want to plant my feet there, talk to some neighbors, maybe start a neighborhood watch, and then, go from there. So what are some steps that you've done to make yourself a little more self-sufficient? And, maybe you can give me some advice on that.
Yeah, that all sounds awesome, brother. I think that's definitely the great direction to be in. And I haven't kept up too much with Owen's work, except for I've seen some of the Patreon stuff, but I'm glad to hear that he's encouraging that with people, because that is 100% a part of the message. And again, the website is freedomcells.org, as in CELLS. We call the groups cells or groups. It's the goal is to build decentralized groups of 7 to 8 people who can share skills, share knowledge, build, like you said, neighborhood watches, have backup supply of food. What do we do in times of emergency? And this doesn't have to be the sort of, you're preparing for the zombie apocalypse. This can just be, hey, like, for example, in Houston, we get hurricanes. Well, how are we as a community going to deal with that if that happens? So we're not dependent on the government. Because like you said, if we're dependent on these systems, we more than likely would have to acquiesce and submit to them. So, for example, if the only way you can get your food is to go to the grocery store, because in our modern world, most of us are dependent on these unsustainable systems anyway.
I apologize, everybody. The connection was lost because of a windstorm that was going on outside my house. But stay tuned for this breaking news.
Some security guards in Belgium were caught flat-footed today by a cowardly sneak attack on one of the world's wealthiest men. The target was Microsoft Chairman Bill Gates, arriving for a meeting with community leaders. Watch what happens when a team of hitmen meet him first with a pie in the face. Gates was momentarily and understandably shaken, but he was not injured. The hit squad piled on with 2 more pies before one of them was wrestled to the ground and arrested. The others released the moment and got away. Gates went inside, wiped his face clean, and made no comment. He then went ahead with his scheduled meeting. No word on the motive for this attack.
And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Yeah, so the whole goal of Freedom Cells is just to try to get organized, decentralized, localized, get people to plug in so that when we are faced with difficult situations like wear a mask or take a vaccine or do this, comply in order to get your food, in order to live your life, that we have options. You know, I am an optimist, but I also, think that we are going to have difficult decisions to face. And that, as we're already seeing, that can either be, like you mentioned earlier, you're going to walk into a store without a mask and kind of hope that nobody bothers you, and if they do bother you, start a conversation. But most people, they don't want to be bothered. They just want to go about, even if they think it's BS, well, I'm still going to put it on. And so we're already seeing that sort of submission, which is a little worrisome to me. But I think that those of us who are prepared and who are most proactive and who are most organized and thinking ahead for ourselves and for our families are going to be able to fare better than those of us who choose to just follow the system, like you said, separating the weak from the strong. So as far as advice, just I would say check out freedomcells.org, freedomcells.org. You create a profile in there with your skills, your interests, and your goals, and then you can use the map to search for cells and groups in your area. You can use the other map to search for individuals near you. And basically we're encouraging people just to create a group online with the goal of meeting in the real world to try to organize and think about how we can create more freedom in our lives and build that community structure, and including, like you mentioned, the neighborhood watches, community gardens, like all these sort of things that they create more independence in your lives instead of more dependence on the systems. And I absolutely think growing our own food, learning more about permaculture, doing the spiritual work, to making time for yourself, and if you start a Freedom Cell or you have a local neighborhood group, whatever you call it, making that a part of the equation too, that everybody here, like, hey, let's all agree that we're actively trying to empower each other and work on our own shit and, get through everything, not just let's stock up on the food, but not do the internal work. Because again, it's that balance between the two, right? Because I tend to believe that even if we overcome they that are out here in front of us and we start building a better world, if we do not do that internal work, maybe it'll take a generation, 2 generations or so. I think we'll end up cycling back, and maybe we'll become the new people who think that they know what's best for everybody and that they want to be in control. Because I don't think that the people who are running things, the powers that wish that they were, I don't think that they're very happy. I feel like if you're a happy person, as you and I both know, you don't go out kind of harassing people. You don't go bother people. You don't feel like I need to tell everybody how to live their life. I want to control other people. You tend to find that sense of self-satisfaction within yourself, and you're working on your own things, and you want to help other people. I feel like the people who are that controlling, kind of dominating mindset are typically not happy with their own internal world, so they're trying to control the external world, right? So work on the spiritual side of things, the internal side of things, the healing, that important healing, and yes, also be proactive in the physical world and think about how you can take care of yourself, your family, and friends. And if you want to get involved with Expose Bill Gates Day or anything like that, that's going to be this Saturday, August 8th, on the streets, online, whatever you can do, whatever's most convenient for you, and make an effort, though. I will say, I want it to be convenient so it's accessible, but also I tend to believe one of the problems we're facing is that maybe things are too convenient and too comfortable for many of us, and we need to get out of our comfort zones. We need to get out of our little bubbles. And you might be saying, well, Derrick, I'm not the kind of person that likes to speak to people. I'm kind of, I'm an introvert. Well, so am I, and I had to push myself out of my introvert bubble the last 10 years because there are bigger things going on than my own insecurities, and I had to learn how to challenge them and push them and grow through that. So I would say, even if you're a little bit more introverted, or you maybe feel a little bit intimidated by the idea of talking to people or going on Freedom Cells or meeting other people and growing your own food, push yourself, challenge yourself. You're capable of so much if you push yourself to that next level.
Yeah, I think that's all comes down to learning about yourself. If you're an introvert, get to know what your tendencies are. That's when I figured that out about myself also. My personality type, it was huge. I was really able to let a lot of things go, you know, forgive myself for things, and then just kind of accept certain things about myself. But then again, it's not an excuse. It's just helps with empathy. But no, I love that message, and I think we could wrap it up right there. So where can they find you? You already said it, but say it again. I'll put the links in the below too.
Yeah, my main website is theconsciousresistance.com. That's where you can find my books. I have 5 books I've written. They're all available to download for free, including my most recent one called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which deals with a lot of the things we're dealing with today. My documentaries are all for free on there as well, and that's just my main place for my content. And then, of course, the Freedom Cells website for anybody who wants to try to plug in and get organized. I appreciate you talking to me, brother.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. We got to do this again.
Absolutely.
Thanks.